Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I finally got around to finishing all the testing for this patch, so in the next few days you're going to see the videos for Juggernaut, Absorbing Man, and Titania rollout, as well as a guide for World Boss Legend Gore. I've extensively tested Hulk in the last few days, both at level 70, at level 80, and at T4, as well as messing around with his health to damage mechanic, and I don't really understand the negative perspective that people have for his performance in PvP. I understand that some people might not be thrilled with the idea that they have to spend a lot of materials to get the character to T4, and he can potentially still be countered easily by some of the metas in Timeline, such as blast characters like Warlock and Emma, and potentially even Thanos if he builds up his skills. I can understand people's frustration in that, but at the same time, it's not really healthy for game balance for a character like Hulk to not be countered by strong blast types like those characters. And in Timeline specifically, despite the fact that those characters are still available, I've been widely noticing that Hulk is in a lot of teams, so I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes a meta staple in Timeline, depending on the ban list of course. Also, while he does face his challenges in the current Timeline meta, as soon as a T4 PvP speed type comes along, his value will rise considerably and the blast characters will kind of get shifted out a bit. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff that I covered in this video, and the first part is PvE testing and the second part is PvP testing, specifically Timeline and a little bit of Alliance Conquest. So if you're only interested in his performance in certain content, then just go to the timestamps in the description and there's links to specific times that you can go to. If you didn't see in the last video, I tested his old uniform on Knull just to get an idea of what his clear time was with that one, and it was around 30 seconds left for me. With the new uniform, however, his improvement in terms of damage for PvE is significantly higher, since I was able to clear the same stage about 2 minutes and 30 seconds faster. Because Hulk was doing so well with no damage proc, I decided to go to a higher stage, but this time adding 2 supports, and I was still able to clear the stage 19 of Knull with about 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. Unfortunately, the next stages available to Hulk are 35 to 39, and with no damage proc at level 70, I wasn't able to complete that stage and got to about the last 7 health bars before time ran out. I kinda died, but I'll just take that as it is. On Mephisto stage 25, with Drax's leadership and Sif's support, I was able to get down to the last 2 health bars before time ran out, but if I played it a little bit better, I might have been able to finish the stage with about no time left. Even though the character's kit is designed towards PvP, if you do decide that you want to use the character for PvE in terms of build recommendations, I would say that you would want to use a CTP of Rage if you are using the character in things like Giant Boss Raid or possibly things like World Boss. And if you want to push to those higher stages of World Boss Legend, your best option would probably be a reforged CTP of Destruction, either a Mighty or a Brilliant, specifically with that strike effect, which is the top proc that gives more damage versus bosses. At level 70 though, you can see for reference that I can complete a Dormammu on the combat type advantage day with 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining roughly. You'll notice that I didn't say that the CTP of Rage will be good for things like Alliance Battle Extreme or Squad Battle, since from the testing that I did and from the results that I saw from other players, the CTP of Rage doesn't really seem to work exactly as intended in that mode, so even a CTP of Regen actually matches the same score as a CTP of Rage there for some reason. I can't really say why, because I don't really know what kind of interaction is happening behind the scenes. Either way, you can see that setting up the team for that combat villain restriction, which is Red Guardian without his uniform and a bomb or abomination as a support, although I do think Taskmaster is better than Red Guardian, did end up getting me about 8.7 million points. Keep in mind that if you don't have other combat villains for this particular day, Hulk is a pretty good candidate because he does have Silence, Paralysis, and Burn across his skills. He has Silence and Paralysis on his 2nd skill, I believe, and then Paralysis on his 4th and Burn on his 5th, which means that he covers all of the 3 different seasons for Alliance Battle Extreme. You can see that I got a much higher score in squad battle because I was able to benefit off of Sif's leadership and support, as well as Valkyrie's support. After I got the character to level 80, his clear time improved by about 1 minute and 20 seconds on stage 19, which likely would have been even faster since 3:40 to 4 minutes is kind of the cap for clearing Knull with his animations and different little mini phases. You can see the improvement more clearly on the stage 35, where I wasn't previously able to complete the stage and had 7 health bars remaining, whereas with the level 80 upgrade or increase, I'm able to complete it with 3 minutes and 15 seconds left, which means it's a greater than 3 minute and 15 second improvement. You can see it even more clearly in the Mephisto stage 25, where I previously wasn't able to complete it. I had 2 health bars left, whereas with the level 80 increase, I'm able to complete it with 3 minutes and 40 seconds remaining at the very least. If you're curious to know what rotation I'm using, if you have something like a CTP of Rage or even a CTP of Regen, the rotation that I used is you basically just cancel your 3, 1, and 2, and then you go into the 5th skill, which you delay cancel after he hits the ground with a hammer, and then immediately go into your 4th skill till that ends. After that, you quickly cancel the 1st skill and go into the 2nd skill, and then you do the 3rd skill canceled immediately into the 5th skill, and after the hammer hits again, you either tap the 1 or 2nd skill, which will fill up your ultimate skill, and at that point you use your ultimate skill and then go into the 4th skill after the ultimate hits the ground. So basically, to summarize, you're basically spamming your 1, 2, and 3 when they're off cooldown just to fill up your ultimate faster, and the main damage is coming from your 5th skill and your 4th skill. If you're lucky enough to get the character to T4, you basically use your 7th skill or the T4 skill anytime it's available, but more ideally when you're closer to the end of the rotation before going into your ultimate 5th and 4th skill. The wording on the T4 skill is a little bit weird since it says final damage, but I did a lot of testing to find out that it doesn't apply to just one skill, and it does apply across multiple skills, similar to a CTP of Rage proc. Either way, you can see that even without the T4, the level 80 improvement makes a massive difference since I was able to complete Giant Boss Raid almost 2 minutes faster with that level increase. In Alliance Battle, his score went up by 400,000 points with the increase, and in Squad Battle, it went up around 300,000 points, which should be close to 400,000 if I had tested more often to get a more ideal result. I would say his T4 stat bump is pretty good. At first I thought it was kind of a moderate improvement, but then I checked versus the other characters, and he does get the biggest health increase from T3 to T4, which was around 17,000 for me, although I was kind of hoping it would be a little bit more, somewhere around the 20,000 mark. But I'm pretty sure that the devs scaled it back a little bit in case they thought that he might get too much damage and health at the same time. It would have also been nice if they scaled up his energy defenses a little bit more, but I guess that they left a clear vulnerability in his kit for energy types to be able to counter him. In terms of best strikers to use for the T4 skill, offensively or for PvE, it's best to use characters that you also have T4 so that your striker skill is at max level. So that could be characters like Moon Knight or Iron Man. But just keep in mind that if you have multiple T4s and want to put strikers for those T4s, you can only have one character assigned to one T4 character. So for example, if I have Hulk and Thor both at T4, and I also have Moon Knight at T4, I can only use Moon Knight on Hulk, and I can't use him on Hulk and Thor. Doctor Strange should also provide a good damage burst as a striker, and has the added benefit of probably time freezing the opponent. Daredevil is also a decent option for PvE since he does provide that all defense down that ignores immunity, which Hulk doesn't have, and the benefit is that it applies right away at 60%. So if you do decide to use Hulk in things like this patch, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend since I tested him and he wasn't very good there, but if you do want to do that, then Daredevil would be a good option for that. On the PvP side, I would say that Ancient One with the old uniform is likely his best option as a striker, since she also provides debuff and that heal bubble But if you don't want to constantly switch uniforms for Ancient One, I would say that Spider-Man provides the next best option, since he not only iframe ignores, but he also removes buffs, webs the characters for at least 5 seconds, and can penetrate all sources at a 70% chance. On top of all of that, the damage that he inflicts is speed-based, meaning if the opponent used the blast type to counter Hulk when that T4 skill goes off, Spider-Man will apply that speed damage added bonus versus those types. Black Widow is also a great option and has very similar effects to Spider-Man, and if you also take into consideration the fact that she might be getting a T4 with the data mines that have been going around, she might be the best option going forward, since she also allow Hulk to get the max level striker effect. If you're using Hulk to take out a lot of villains, or suspect that the opponent is using characters like Thanos to take you out, then Captain Marvel is also a very solid pick because she does have the type advantage versus villain types, and she does apply a lot of different effects or negative effects to the opponent, which you would benefit off of. Either way, I wouldn't really worry too much about the striker in things like Alliance Conquest, but in Timeline it will make a little bit more of a difference since you can spam skills and force that T4 to activate. So those are just some of the ones that you might consider to help you out. I couldn't really figure out what the exact interaction with his T4 was, but it didn't really provide as significant of an improvement in the clear time as I expected. It was about a 5 to 10 second improvement in some of these lower stages, but I think that's more because the stage animations and interruptions kind of limit the clear time there. Regardless of what that improvement is on those lower stages, you can see the character is pretty amazing since I was able to take out stage 44 of Mephisto with over 2 minutes left, and you have to keep in mind when you compare it to the other T4s that Hulk doesn't have a damage proc, nor do I even have his artifact. You can kind of get a better idea of the improvement in Giant Boss Raid Dormammu, where I previously cleared it with 5 minutes and 25 seconds left at level 80, whereas with the T4 I completed it about 30 seconds faster. I did an additional test, this time with a more optimized team, using Sif as the leadership and support and Valkyrie as the support, and I was able to improve my clear time by nearly 40 seconds. And again, you have to keep in mind this is with no damage proc, and if I was to even use his artifact, which should help a lot in the second phase of the fight, I might be able to have completed the fight in roughly 3 minutes total. I would say that is pretty amazing compared to other characters who do have a damage proc and are specifically built only for PvE. With the T4, I was able to get about a 500,000 point increase in Alliance Battle Extreme, and then by optimizing the team a little bit more, using Taskmaster instead of Red Guardian, I was able to get an even higher score by around 200,000 more. Since I realized that the T4 skill wasn't really doing anything in Alliance Battle Extreme or Squad Battle, I'm not really sure why that is, but my guess would be because there's minions around that might not trigger the damage proc and instead might trigger the mitigation effect. Again, since I realized that the T4 skill didn't really do anything there, I switched out my striker to one that dealt more damage and was able to break in the 10 million range by doing that. For people that have a better build, including his artifact, and have refined his rotation a little bit more, I've seen them score somewhere in the 10.6 to 10.7 million range. And again, with more ideal team and squad battle, I was able to score around 500,000 more points from level 80 to T4. Although Hulk's PvE performance is actually quite good, I would say that his PvP performance is just as good, if not better. His new uniform not only improves his survival by improving his healing per second, as well as healing when he gets to a low health threshold, but also gives him a higher health increase with the third skill, which also converts to damage. And going on from that, his offensive capabilities have improved drastically. He basically one-shots any character with his fourth skill due to the damage proc and iframe ignore that it has. And the second, fourth, and fifth skill all have super guard break, meaning if the opponent gets hit by them, they're basically gonna be locked in place regardless of whether they have guard break immunity. I would say that the main downside for the uniform is with the fourth skill having a little bit longer cooldown than the other skills, and because he's so dependent on it to take out opponents when they iframe, it can potentially leave him standing there to take a lot of damage. The fifth skill is also a bit problematic because it has a big wind up before he actually does the skill to deal damage, meaning that he is usually left open or vulnerable to take a lot of damage in that period of time or have that skill interrupted. If his 5th skill actually had an iframe at the beginning of it, it would really help with his survival, but besides that, his survival really isn't that bad. It's only noticeable when he's facing opponents that have a type advantage versus him, or possibly strong reflect characters like Luke Cage, or alternatively if he's facing high damage characters that have a lot of AoE effects like Thanos, which stacks a lot of AoE attacks before he deals his main iframe ignore. But as you can see from the clips, most oftentimes he'll take out the opponents very quickly with the 4th skill before they have a chance to get going. And if you build him well with good HP and a good CTP and also a good team, you can easily survive the period when his 4th skill is down, and he can even take out opponents without the 4th skill, usually with the 2nd skill or the 3rd skill. I've seen a bunch of people say that Hulk is basically useless at T3 and you need him at T4 to be able to do anything, and I can tell you without a doubt, you can see from the clips, that that's clearly not the case. His AI rotation is actually really good. He usually prioritizes the 4th skill first, most often because the opponent tends to iframe, and then he'll usually go into his 3rd skill, which will give him that massive HP damage buff as well as the HP increase. And then from there, he'll often go into his 2nd skill, which usually is a one-shot if the 3rd isn't, and that can also lock them down because it has super guard break. And lastly, he does his 5th skill, which oftentimes gets cancelled anyway, and he'll go back into his 4th. Keep in mind that this overview is fully on the character on auto. If you do play the character on manual, he's very easy to play since you basically just stay alive by either moving around or using other skills, and use the 4th skill to one-shot opponents. As you can see, unless you're fighting a character like Warlock or Emma, you won't really have any difficulty surviving in between the time when your 4th isn't active. If you're wondering what ISO 8 set I went with and which one I would recommend, I tried out Binary Power, Stark Backing, Protect the Captain, and even another one that I'm currently using now, which is called Veteran Soldier. You might be surprised to see that this ISO 8 set is actually a 4-option set, but I did crunch the numbers, and if you use this set that gives the 5.5% HP as well as 2 options for HP ISOs, and you stack all the rest of the ISOs with either HP or chaotic HP ISOs, you do end up with the highest overall health increase compared to the other sets, being higher by about 2.5%, and you also have the benefit of having some type of proc. The higher health usually ends up giving you a lot of benefits, such as higher healing over time, obviously higher damage, and you also have a bigger HP shield proc when something like a CTP of regen activates. However, if you do want that additional 15% heal, then I would recommend a Stark Backing over this set. I opted against Binary Power since most shields now can be penetrated, considering that most characters have penetration to all sources, and when I was trying to see how good Protect the Captain was, I couldn't actually tell what the reduction damage was most often, because that buff that gives you the 40% defense would often get removed from incapacitation effects. This is why if you're going to build the character with a survival ISO 8 set, I would probably recommend either Stark Backing or Veteran Soldier, or even I Am Also Groot. But if you really need to round out your stats, then the Binary Power and the Protect Captain ISO 8 set are also fine. In these following clips, you can see how the character performs at T4, but because I was already one-shotting with the 4th skill previously, you won't really notice anything too drastic, only that his survival is better, and he can potentially now fully take out the 2 lives of Warlock, or potentially survive long enough to deal enough damage to Emma to beat her as well. If you're facing those 2 characters back to back though, you're probably going to have troubles because his 4th skill will be on cooldown and you won't have the chance to quickly one-shot them before they deal a lot of damage to you. If you want to know what kind of CTP or build I would recommend for the character, my number 1 option that I would suggest would be a CTP of regen with the penetration option up top. If you just have the attack and defense, the attack isn't going to do anything for him, and the defense increase won't really be noticeable because his energy defenses are already low. So it's the same concept as if you're trying to build up a low wall a bit higher. A person can still get over the wall, but if the wall is high and you try to build it up higher, then it's actually going to be effective. However, the penetration from the regen makes a significant difference since it can basically remove all AoE effects that are currently active, which can potentially kill you, and it knocks the opponent out of the AoE or other damage skills, which gives you enough time to go back into your fourth skill and one-shot them. A Steel CTP of Authority could also be a possible option, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it since a character that has a type advantage versus you can knock that 100% mitigation down under 100% and still deal a lot of damage to you. This is usually why universal types are the most effective with that CTP, since they don't have a type disadvantage to change that mitigation value. That's why you often see it on characters like Doom and Thanos. In addition to that, going for the authority over the regen means you get less damage from the HP, less healing, a smaller HP shield, and less recovery because you're missing out on that recovery rate that it offers. One of the other benefits of getting the character to T4 is that you can build up that T4 skill, which can protect you against some of the characters that might have a type advantage versus you. Since you only really need the fourth skill to take out opponents, you can spam the other skills quickly and just save the T4 skill when you think you're about to take a lot of damage or when a blast type or a counter character is coming up versus you. So you can see here, once Emma switched in, I had that 50% mitigation up, and then it allowed me to get away from her third skill as well as her fifth skill, and my ultimate was also active in case I wanted to use that as well. I also tested out Hulk's old uniform with the T4 upgrade to see how that would work, and although it still holds up okay, the fact is that because it doesn't have penetration on the third skill, many opponents that have Invincible in their kit, he will struggle and fight longer to be able to defeat them, which can sometimes allow for a lot of AoE effects and burst damage to come his way and cause him to die. However, one interesting thing that I found about the old uniform is that he spams his fifth skill more often since it's a faster animation, which often allows him to fill up that ultimate and T4 skill faster. Regardless, however, the new uniform is definitely an improvement since you want to take out the opponent as quickly as possible instead of relying on filling up your ultimate and T4. The timeline results weren't enough to convince you that the character is a PvP meta and will only get more valuable when a speed type is introduced. Here is the character in Alliance Conquest, and as you can see, he has no difficulty instantly wiping any kind of meta team with that fourth skill. He not only takes out characters that he has a type disadvantage versus, like Emma, but he can easily solo a Titan set, which consists of Thanos, Hela, and Colossus by himself. I was just kind of messing around with a solo team here to see how much I could boost his HP and healing to allow him to fight by himself. So I was using Wenwu's lead that gives him the 25% extra HP, as well as Victorious's passive that gives the 30% extra health, and Wenwu also has the benefit of giving the debuff and a heal when he gets to lower health. If that still isn't enough to convince you how ridiculous he is, here is the last test that I did versus a full blast team that has basically two of the top metas to counter him, and he's still able to win this set. This current team that I'm running basically allows him to get up to 1.2 million health with the Alliance Conquest modifier for the health, as well as with HP procs active. Taking this into consideration, I would probably recommend characters with a revive and possibly ones that are blast in combination with combat or physical reflect characters to counter Hulk. So as you can see from the results of the testing, Hulk is possibly one of the best hybrid characters currently in the game, allowing you to do both PvE and high-level PvP even without a damage proc using something like a regen. You also don't necessarily need stacked cards with an insane amount of HP to make him good. I've seen players with anywhere from 40 to 50% health on their cards actually do very well with Hulk. I did spend a lot of time testing and putting this video together, so if you did find it interesting or helpful, please consider liking and subscribing and sharing this with other people. The next video that I'll be making will cover Juggernaut, so make sure to stay tuned for that. However, that rounds out this video, so thanks for taking the time to watch it, but the video is now over.